Welcome to the channel. I was recently looking at documents released for the Southwest Corridor project in early 2022, and I found some interesting information. Okay, but firstly, what is the Southwest Corridor project? It is a light rail project that will extend the Max Green Line into Tigard and Tualatin using Barber Boulevard, I-5, sort of, and an existing freight rail alignment, which happens to also be the West right-of-way. It will have 13 stations and will bring light rail to the final corridor that doesn't have any light rail service, the Southwest Corridor. In November 2020, voters rejected a huge transit funding measure that would include lots of projects, not just Southwest Corridor, but a massive transit upgrade from what we see today. From what I remember hearing from somebody, Metro is going to try to reintroduce this in 2024. I don't know if that's true or not, but let's hope so. This project is not connected to Joe Biden's infrastructure bill. This happened way before that. It's not connected in any way. I will be making a video at some point talking about where this infrastructure bill money will actually be used, but it's not going to be for Southwest Corridor. In the meantime, however, Metro has released two major documents. The final environmental impact statement. For a very long time it was just the draft environmental impact statement, and the record of decision. I'm going to kind of summarize what I found and what Metro has found in these documents for this video. Now, because I don't feel like saying environmental impact statement over and over again, it's commonly abbreviated as EIS. The draft EIS was actually made several years ago, and there was a public comment period where you could review it and submit your feedback. In fact, there have been plenty of opportunities for sending your feedback. The draft EIS is required in order to get federal funding for your project. And so when the final EIS gets released, it's more or less the same thing, but it has refinements from public comments and all that sort of thing. That's all factored into here. And that was what was released in early 2022. These statements are incredibly detailed and very expansive, totaling to almost 400 pages. And I will link the Metro page where you can view the final EIS in the description if you want to see it for yourself. So, here's the new information. There are now 3 terminus options. If, for whatever reason, the funding falls short of what was previously planned and they're not able to construct the whole line, there are now 3 terminus options. Bridgeport Transit Center is still on the table and was the original terminus option, which ends at Bridgeport Village in Tualatin, which is today's Tualatin Park and Ride. This would completely transform the area with a new station, a large parking garage, and a transit center within the parking garage. This is very costly, but it would be the entire project. But it could be cut back by 1 station to Upper Boones Ferry Road, which would require reconstructing the platforms here, and Tualatin Park and Ride would be left alone. Or it could be cut all the way back to the Hall Boulevard station, which is pretty much walking distance from the Tigard Transit Center. Now, all of these options mean that the line would end there, but it could easily be extended at a future date if they get the proper funding for it. Now, in Appendix A of the FEIS, a bus redesign map is shown. And this is completely separate from the Forward Together thing, so I wouldn't really trust any of the things in here. There are some interesting line redesigns and numbers and things. that are completely different from Forward Together. I think I would trust Forward Together survey more than this, but I'm still going to talk about the bus redesign because it is absolutely a key part of Southwest Corridor MAX, just like it was with all the other MAX lines. Now, a bus redesign would be required because, well, some of this might be duplicated by the MAX, or services would just no longer really be needed because, again, the MAX would be providing service through here and it would be faster and higher capacity than existing buses like the 12. And remember, Bridgeport Transit Center is going to be designed to be a transit center, a big one. And so it's going to be vastly different from today's Tualatin Park and Ride, which is served by, I believe, 5 lines, and only one of which actually provides service 7 days a week. This would be vastly different. Another thing worth remembering is because there would be all these canceled routes, there would be lots of other bus lines that could help take up the slack from that. And so you would end up with bus lines that are more frequent, there would be higher coverage. It would, in general, help a lot of things. So it is a good thing, if a little confusing sometimes. There are 2 maps in this appendix. There's the no-build alternative, which is what you do if you don't build the Southwest Corridor project, or there's the preferred alternative, which shows the preferred alternative, which is building the MAX and readjusting lots of the buses to compensate. And this highlights what I'm basically here to talk about. How will the Green Line and bus services coexist? How will everything look? Again, I would not think that this would be super final, thanks to the Forward Together thing, but we're still going to talk about it anyways, and I'm going to tell you my vision, because it is different but similar. This section here is facts. The portion after this will be my opinions. So, the bus routes with major changes include, well, all of them really, but let's start with the 12. Well, you wouldn't really need to serve Barber Boulevard any longer, because the MAX is basically doing that. So this route would be shortened to only go from downtown Portland up Sandy Boulevard. So it would become much shorter. The Line 64 would become canceled because it's very similar to this Southwest Corridor line between OHSU and Tigard Transit Center. It's not exactly the same line, but the fact that it's meant to be fast means that, well, it doesn't really need to exist because the Max Green Line should be fast as well. And it goes between OHSU and Tigard, and other destinations too. The Line 65 is also canceled for some reason. I don't really get it. I mean, yeah, it kind of runs in this area, but I don't fully understand why they wanted to cancel that. Line 1 becomes extended a lot and goes to Washington Square and Tigard Transit Center, taking over today's 45 on Olson Road all the way to the end at Tigard Transit Center. And also, while we're talking about the Line 45, it becomes completely changed and serves Beaverton Transit Center instead of Tigard Transit Center, and ends up going over the Selwood Bridge instead of entering downtown Portland. Like I said, completely different. There were also a ton of new bus lines on here as well, like a new 28 in the Milwaukee area, a 41 that went on Beaverton-Hillsdale Highway and also goes over the Selwood Bridge, an 89 from Tigard to Tualatin to Sherwood, and a new 95 from Beaverton to Sherwood, as well as probably a few others. Overall, I agree with some of this. The Line 64 doesn't really need to exist after the Southwest Corridor MAX gets built. Until it gets built, yes, it does have a place in TriMet system because it's fast and a nice quick way to go from OHSU to Tigard and anywhere in between. But after Southwest Corridor is built, let's face it, you're not going to need that line anymore. Extending Line 1 to Washington Square, that makes sense. It's pretty easily doable. Vermont Street goes all the way to Olson Road. It's Honestly, I wish I would have thought of that as well. It doesn't really need to go to Tigard Transit Center, although more coverage is always welcome if you can find another way to go from Washington Square to Tigard, even if it involves maybe Highway 217. I'm also fine with a route on Beaverton-Hillsdale Highway that goes over the Selwood Bridge. That's something that's not currently possible to do on a one-seat ride. In fact, it's kind of hard to do in general, so that's interesting. Also, it's nice to see a new route from Beaverton to Sherwood, the 95. Well, hang on a minute. How come Sherwood's getting all these improvements? The Southwest Corridor line doesn't go to Sherwood. But then Hillsborough just gets left in the dust. We have over 100,000 people in Hillsborough and 4 bus lines. But according to this, Sherwood's gonna have like 5 bus lines. Sherwood. There's nothing to do in Sherwood. Okay, that's a lie, but how is that fair that they get the coverage but Hillsborough just gets the same 4 bus lines? Okay, to be fair, yeah, okay, Forward Together introduced some new bus lines for the area, and at the time of me making the script for this video, Forward Together thing hadn't been released to the public yet. But I still think my anger is justified. Hillsborough is always forgotten about. When it comes to transit service, Hillsborough is always forgotten about. And I'm not too sure why that is. Okay, now they had the Line 68 increased service from, instead of just rush hour only, to run all day. But the 61 and 66, the only 2 Markham Hill routes left, wouldn't do that. They would still just remain as rush hour only. I would flip that. Sort of. In fact, if we're being honest here, I don't really see a point of the 68 existing at all. And this is the one line they wanted to increase service on. I'm telling you, the 68 does not need to exist. It is not any faster than just taking a Line 8 into downtown Portland. The only thing it does differently is that it comes down Columbia and Jefferson Streets and serves Goose Hollow. That's the only difference. But guess what? The Line 8 comes up the same route and serves Pioneer Square, which connects with more MAX lines. If you wanted service to Goose Hollow, just take the MAX to Goose Hollow. Or get off at Columbia and Jefferson Streets and take a 6, 58, maybe a 45 down to that area. There are options. The 68 does not need to exist, and it certainly doesn't need all-day weekday service. But something like the 66, where it goes express to Hollywood Transit Center, goes express over the Ross Island Bridge, down Powell Boulevard, only serving a couple stops, and then heading up Cesar Chavez Boulevard all the way to Hollywood Transit Center. Now that would be a lot more usable to do all day. That would be very convenient to do all day on a weekday. If I'm trying to get to Hollywood Transit Center quickly for some reason, I shouldn't have to be stuck with taking the 75 all the way up Cesar Chavez. I should be able to take a faster bus service because, well, there's already the 66. The 66 has been an established route for who knows how long. Very long time. And so, to me, it just seems like a no-brainer to extend 66's hours, not 68's. And maybe the 61, Markham Hill Beaverton, as well. Maybe I'm biased because I live on the west side, but I would find an express bus on Beaverton-Hillsdale Highway quite useful, and that's exactly what the 61 is, with a couple of exceptions where it kind of serves some neighborhood streets, but for the most part, it's just express on Beaverton-Hillsdale Highway. And now for a gigantic question mark. Well, okay, not that big. Line 45. They completely changed this, and now it makes no sense. Today's 45 starts at Tigard Transit Center, goes through a neighborhood, ends up at Washington Square, and then goes down Garden Home Road as far as it lets you go, and eventually leads into Portland through Capitol Highway and Barber Boulevard, and it just weaves into downtown. Yeah, the updated route doesn't do that. The new 45 starts at Beaverton Transit Center, goes in through some area, heads down Garden Home Road, and then heads onto Vermont Street for some reason. Somehow it ends up over the Selwood Bridge and ends up in Milwaukee. What? That's not even a little bit similar to the current routing. I don't understand what drugs were taken to have that as the result of the 45. That makes no sense to me. I've never been on the 45, partly because it runs so incredibly infrequently, but I know that this doesn't make sense. It can't make sense. This is just weird. This is just changing something for the sole purpose of changing it. It might make more sense to just leave this route alone, pretty much, how we currently see it, or maybe have it end at Washington Square if you're going to have the Line 1 continue to Tigard or whatever. And it might make sense to just have a fresh new line number that kind of does the same basic idea, goes from Beaverton and goes over the Selwood Bridge, except maybe by taking Multnomah Boulevard, or possibly Beaverton Hillsdale Highway, which there's already a bus that might be easier to do. I don't really see a point in changing the 45 in that way. Seems way too extreme. I would also like to see Allen Boulevard get a dedicated bus. Right now it's kinda used by the 53 during weekday rush only. It's kinda used by the 88. So I have long ago thought of a line 89, because the 88 briefly uses Allen, so the line numbering makes sense here. And the 89 would start at Washington Square, head up Shoals Ferry a little bit, sort of like how the 56 and 78 come out of Washington Square, except it would take a left onto Allen Boulevard, and it would just be a dedicated bus all the way down Allen until you get to 170th. And Allen Boulevard name changes twice, to Davis Street and then to Oak Street. But whatever, it's still basically the same road. Then it would take a right onto 170th Avenue, and it would provide dedicated service on 170th Avenue. And it would end at the El Monica Park and Ride, right there, at El Monica Southwest 170th Avenue. It would be very, very simple. It would be a nice, simple route, but I know it would get used. I think Terwilliger should also get its own bus. I've numbered this as line 40 because right now the 38 and 39 use Terwilliger briefly before splitting off and doing their own thing. The 65 also briefly uses Terwilliger. It doesn't get its own dedicated bus, so that's what I'm sort of fixing here. So the 38, 39, and 40 would all use Terwilliger in this case. This bus would start in downtown Portland and serve the Line 8 stops. It would begin in downtown at North Terminal, though, at Union Station, and it would serve the Line 8 stops on the Transit Mall all the way down to OHSU, but it wouldn't go into OHSU, it would go right by it on Terwilliger. It would just keep going on Terwilliger all the way down to Barber Boulevard, where it would swing into there and end at the Barber Transit Center. I've talked about this a few times, but I'm going to talk about it again. I would split the 51 into two routes. The line 3 would be called 3 Council Crest, and it would travel more or less like you would expect from downtown over Vista Avenue to Council Crest. Although I would probably use the shorter routing of where, it's a bit hard to explain in words, but when you're on Vista Avenue, you would take a right onto Patton Road and an immediate left onto Greenway Avenue. It's faster doing it this way, and these buses would be meant to serve the Council Crest Park. So it would be a faster routing than today's 51 does to Council Crest. And then the portion to Dosh and Hamilton would get taken over by, well, it would just be the 51. But it wouldn't end at Dosh and Hamilton. It would continue going down Dosh Road until you pass Capitol Highway, where you would be able to transfer to a 54, 56, or 61. It would keep going, it turns into 30th Avenue, it would keep going, and then it turns into Capitol Highway with transfers to lines 44 and I think 45. Keeps going and going down Capitol Highway and ends at the Barber Transit Center, which would be a new Southwest Corridor station. So Barber Transit Center would become actually used. It would become a transit center with bus lines actually serving it. And while I'm talking about this general area, the line 55 doesn't really need to exist because much of Hamilton Street is within walking distance of Beaverton-Hillsdale Highway, so you can just use the 54. But the 55's route on Sunset Boulevard is quite a bit further from all that other stuff. So you could retain that. The 55 could be shortened a lot to only go from Portland over to Sunset Boulevard on its existing route, but instead come up Dosh Road a little further and turn around where today's 51 does at Dosh and Hamilton. And that would be the whole 51 route. All of Hamilton Street would get canceled because it's mostly within walking distance of the 54. That was a lot of explanation. That was confusing. The last line I'm going to talk about here is the 94, but there are undoubtedly some other lines as well that are worth mentioning. Now, the 94, today's 94, runs semi-express between Tigard and downtown Portland. It only serves 4 stops, which is really nice. But see, that kind of just sounds like it's the Max Green line. So, yes, I do think the 94 should still exist, because it connects with, it goes all the way to Sherwood, but it's a bit interesting. I think you could have the 94 comfortably go as far as Barber Transit Center, and that's it, because the Southwest Corridor Green Line would also serve Barber Transit Center. Now, you could have some Line 94s on weekdays only be a 94E, or maybe a 94X. It would be like today's 94, where it would serve Main Street in Tigard, and then it would go on to Pacific Highway, and it would only serve a stop at Pacific Highway and 74th, Capitol Highway, and then right there in the Barber Transit Center. Those would be the only 3 stops. It would be like that. Those would be the 94Xs, or 94Es, or whatever. But then there'd be the normal 94s, which would take over for local service between Tigard and Barber Transit Center. And so there would still be local service between Tigard and Barber Transit Center because the Southwest Corridor Green Line wouldn't be providing that service because it wouldn't be running on Barber Boulevard there. I hope that makes sense. So so the 94 would take over today's 12 up to the Barber Transit Center, and then you would have to rely on Max to get into Portland from there. And on weekdays only, some Line 94 trips would also run express with only a few stops to the Barber Transit Center, so that you still get today's familiarity of, oh, well, I can just take the 94 and it'll take me to Barber Transit Center or whatever quickly. There's kind of no easy way to explain that, so I hope that makes sense. Well, thank you for listening to me ramble on and on and on about this. I really hope this project actually happens. The Southwest Corridor has needed it for a very long time. It is almost stupid crowded and stupidly congested. It's time. We really need a light rail line through here. And Tualatin Park and Ride needs that revamp to Bridgeport Transit Center status. And even if that doesn't happen immediately upon opening, I hope any amount of the project is built, because any bit of help is help that we truly need. But for now, I think that'll be it for this video, and I thank you for watching.